Makes me want to go hiking. I don't know about you. Welcome to our new series, Lead Like Jesus. As we were planning this series, we thought, you know what? In our church here, there are a lot of really gifted, impressive, diligent leaders who embody the different aspects that we're going to talk about in this series. So before we look at Jesus and his example of leadership, maybe it'd be good for us to look around and learn from other people in our community. So today, I want you to take a look at this. This is Scott Morris.
So this week, I've got with me my friend Scott Morris. And Scott, we want to learn a little from you. Tell me first, Scott, where do you lead?
Yeah, thanks, Dion. I lead at a company called Explore. We're officially now 2 weeks old. We had been Clearant Corporation and just recently merged with an international competitor to form Explore. And my title there is Senior Vice President of Corporate Development.
Awesome. You also have a leadership role here at Pathfinder.
I do, yeah. I'm currently President of the Board of Directors.
Yeah, so you get the best of both worlds, I guess.
100% true, yeah.
So Scott, I want to ask you a simple question. This week we're going to talk about curiosity. So how does curiosity play into your leadership?
Yeah, it's frankly something I've made a career out of. So my job is to come in. I've worked for 8 or 9 different companies, always with a similar title, corporate development or strategy. And I've never worked in the same industry twice. So what that means is you have to be very adaptable. You come in with just questions, not answers. And, my job has always been to look out, call it 18 to 60 months, so a year and a half to 5 years out. Take the company into new markets, new products, or adjacencies, things that we kind of do, but we want to do better or do more of. So it's just a constant reinventing of the corporation. And I don't have the expertise, in the products or in knowing exactly, what the landscape might look like. But I work with people who do. So it's really kind of drawing answers out of them to formulate a strategy that will work for the next however many years.
Generally speaking, how does your relationship with Jesus as a whole make you a better leader?
Yeah, that's a question I could probably take a day to answer for you. I love talking about what, Jesus has done in my life. So I'd say there's kind of two key things that come to mind when you ask that question. One is that Jesus never promised us that a life of faith is just all roses, right? He promised us that in this life you shall have trouble. He promised us that, if you choose to follow him, brother will turn against brother, neighbor against neighbor. There are going to be valleys. And I've certainly had a number of those, some of them of my own creation. But I grew up in the faith, and, I'm really fortunate that my dad's family in particular, as far back as we can go, or as we know, they were all people of faith, and especially the men in his family just were very inspirational to me. They had a profound impact on me, and they taught me that, because of our faith, because of the belief in Jesus, and yes, you're promised life after death, but that's not really the point, right? The point is to have life and have it to the full here and now. And so they taught me this appreciation of enjoy your faith, like see God's hand in everything. And I think I've really lived that. I've seen, from a young age, I can see and count the blessings that God has given to me. And I think that's a real gift that my family and Jesus have given me. And what that does to, I think to others is it gives me a security that, we can be facing you never know, when you're planning 3, 4, 5 years out, you never know what the world is going to look like. Who would have predicted a pandemic? So you have to place all these bets, and we've gotten ourselves into trouble professionally. There's plenty of projects that have just gone all kinds of wrong, but you always have confidence that roll up the sleeves, do the work, gut it out. But at the end of the day, we have a God who's for us. And if he's for us, who can be against us? And so you have that that comfort that, if it doesn't work out, even if we all get fired, it's going to be okay, right? It's going to be okay. So, you can be an intense person and you can be in stressful situations, but you can still have that peace. And I'd like to think that that's helped me in terms of just giving others comfort and security to do their job, and that it's all going to be okay in the end, regardless of the business outcome.
I love it. If God is for us, who can be against us? Even if we all get fired, it's going to be okay. We are blessed with great leaders here. Curiosity, though, is what Scott was talking about some in there. And I'm not sure, truthfully, that we all actually see curiosity as a virtue, right? Think about it. The way we talk about curiosity in our culture, it's what's killed the cat. I like this. It's a good thing I was only mildly curious, right? Not dead, but pretty bad. Or it's the thing that gets that mischievous monkey into trouble in all the different books, right? Curiosity is this dangerous thing. Alexander Pope, the British poet, said this: one who is too wise an observer of the business of others, like one who is too curious in observing the labor of bees, will often be stung for his curiosity. Now, I think he's warning against being a busybody, being up in other people's business. At the same time, it raises the question, is curiosity actually a good thing? Is it helpful or is it dangerous? And here's what I've come to see. Today, I want to show you what I've come to see. I want to show you what I've come to see in the one whom I believe is the best leader, the greatest leader in all of history, and that is Jesus. And I know for some of you that may sound like an outlandish claim. Some of you are here and you're just investigating the person of Jesus, and so already to be given this idea that he might be the greatest leader in all of human history, maybe that seems like a pious claim without basis. Here's why I would say that. Jesus started something over 2,000 years ago with a handful of people that has not only lasted up until today, but it has increasingly gained market share, more and more adherents, more and more people over 2,000 years. You can't think of many things that started 2,000 years ago that still exist today, let alone have grown, and yet that's what Jesus has done. So even if that doesn't make him the greatest leader in all of human history, it certainly narrows the field down, doesn't it? There aren't many people who can make that claim. And then there are some of you, and you think, no, Jesus is my savior. I don't know about this leader thing, but he's my savior. Maybe you're someone who doesn't feel comfortable having your faith and business stuff mixed together. You're like, no. And yet, here's what maybe you don't realize, that every time you pray or speak and you use the word Lord, ever pray that way? Use the word Lord in your prayers? What you're actually doing is you're professing that you believe in the leadership of Jesus. Lord is not first and foremost a faith title, it's a leadership title. Jesus came to be a king. That's what Lord is about. It's acknowledging that he's our king, he's our leader. And so today I want to show you, maybe you're not convinced, but I want to show you in the one that I believe to be the greatest leader who ever lived, I want to show you how he was also a curious leader. And we're going to see this in Mark chapter 10. So if you're following along in your own device or your own Bible, Mark chapter 10, starting at verse 35, the words will be here for us today. Two action-packed encounters with Jesus. Look for the curiosity here. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, two of his closest followers, came to him. "Teacher," they said, "we want you to do for us whatever we ask." Now, every parent has been in this situation before, right? "Dad, will you do something for me?" "That depends. What are you about to ask? I'm not going to give you a blank check." Jesus responds to them, though, with a question. "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. They replied, "Let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory." You don't know, by the way, when you read this, I always think of the disciples as like these, full-grown men, 30, 40-year-old men. In the nature of that question, you remember that most of Jesus' disciples were young men in their teens. And you can tell it by the nature of the question. Jesus says, you don't know what you're asking. "Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with?" "We can," they answered. And Jesus said to them, "You will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. But to sit at my right or left, that's not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they've been prepared by my Father." Now, when the other 10 disciples heard about this, again, remember that these are mostly teenage men probably, they became indignant with James and John, probably because they didn't think of it first, right? They didn't ask for the promotion first. But Jesus called them all together and said, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them in not a good way. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant." Now, I'm going to tread lightly here because we might step on next week's topic, but we're going to read the whole narrative through. Whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man, referring to himself, did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So, we have Jesus in this one encounter. Again, we're not going to get into the service stuff. And then it immediately goes into another encounter. Then they came to Jericho, right? So right after this, they come to this place, Jericho, and Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city. A blind man, Bartimaeus, which simply means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside, and he was begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called to the blind man, "Hey, cheer up, on your feet. Jesus is calling for you." So throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and he came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." "Go," Jesus said. "Your faith has healed you." And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. As I told you, 2 action-packed encounters, part of this same chapter. We're not going to dive into all of this today, but here's what I want you to notice. I want you to notice this question: what do you want me to do for you? It's the question that Jesus asked both people. Now with the blind guy, maybe that was obvious. It's the same question that he asked James and John when they said, "Teacher, do for us whatever we ask, give us the blank check." Jesus responds, "What do you want me to do for you?" And what you'll see as you read the narrative of Jesus' life in the Gospels is that Jesus' ministry was filled with questions of people. What do you want me to do for you? Or one time to a woman at the well, he says, "Would you give me a drink?" Later on to one of his other disciples, Peter, who has a colossal failure, Jesus asked Peter 3 times, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter says yes, and Jesus asks him again, and Peter says yes, and Jesus asks him again. And Peter gets really mad and goes, "Jesus, why do you keep asking me the same question?" To some of his other close friends, Mary and Martha, at the loss of their brother, Jesus says, "I'm the resurrection and the life. If you believe in me, you'll never die. Even if you die, you'll live." He says, "Do you believe this?" Jesus loved to ask questions. And here's what I've come to notice, that this is what great leaders do. Scott Morris talked about this. They ask all kinds of questions. See, great leaders, they're curious. And yes, great leaders may also be well-educated. They may also have tenacity and grit and nerve. They probably have a high EQ, but great leaders are also curious people. They're filled with a sense of wonder. They want to understand the world and the people that they lead better. And deep down, I kind of personally know this is true. It just makes sense, right? You think about the great inventors or anyone, they're curious people. They go, "How can we do this better? How could?" And yet I'll acknowledge that while I'm a very curious person in my normal personal life, sometimes I find it really hard to be curious as a leader. Today you're gonna get a confessional out of me as to why curiosity is hard for me as a leader. The first reason is I hate admitting that I don't know things. Anybody else? Apparently a lot of you don't like to admit anything. I hate admitting I don't know things, especially as a leader. I've kind of bought into this view that the leader should be the smartest person in the room. which is not true, and yet I still believe that it's true. I function as if that's true. So whether I'm in a room with my kids, we're in the living room and they're asking me questions, whether I'm in a room with my church family, I tend to believe this awful belief that I have to be the smartest person in the room. Because if I'm not the smartest person in the room, if I don't know things, if I'm wrong about things, then the people I lead might go, we need to find someone smarter to lead us. Let's get a new senior pastor. And while my kids, they cannot fire me, thankfully, what they can do is they can stop coming to me. They can stop asking me questions, right? They can go find other people to help them figure out the world if I'm a guy who doesn't know. Just this last week, or it was actually 2 weeks ago, there's a guy who attends Pathfinder who's an expert fundraiser, really great at fundraising. And he sent me an email and he said, hey, Pastor Dion, it looks like you could maybe use some help with fundraising. And I read that email and I thought, wow, part of me thought, what a great offer. This guy's offering to help me with fundraising. He's volunteering, he wasn't trying to sell me on anything. But there was this other part of me that was offended, right? Wait, why does he think I need help? Am I doing a bad job? And what if we sit down and I discover that even though fundraising is a big part of what I'm responsible for here, what if I actually discover that I don't know what I'm doing? They're gonna look for a new pastor, right? See, as a leader sometimes, as a person, it's easy for me to be curious. I love science, I'm curious about people, I'm curious about how the world works. As a leader, sometimes it's hard because I hate admitting I don't know things, whether it's as a pastor or as a parent. I mean, Jocelyn will tell you, it's not very often when my kids ask me a question that I just go, I don't know. I usually make up an answer because I want them to think I'm smart. They're not here right now. I might change that for 11 o'clock, just so you know. One of the other reasons that it's hard for me to be curious as a leader is it just takes longer. I am impatient for results, which is actually a documented scientific fact. Like, I've been studied and I'm not very patient when it comes to results. And so even though I know curiosity may lead to new breakthroughs or new insights or innovations, it may add value. Here's what I tend to believe, that the world is moving so fast and it's hard enough to keep up. So who has time to sit around and be curious? What we need is results. Or finally, and I think this is probably a combination of those two, I find in my life that what makes curious hard for me as a leader is that I'm afraid of opening Pandora's box. Right? You know that mythical box that once you open it, you can't get it closed again. See, if I acknowledge something deep down, here's what I know about me, that there are certain beliefs I have that I am not willing to give up, even if they are wrong. Right? I don't want to know about it because they're such core beliefs to me. I'm not sure how it would go on if I had to rebuild my life without those beliefs. There are other things that I don't want to be true, and I'm terrified that if I get too curious, I might discover that they are true. And this is true in really big things. This is true even in small things. My family and I recently watched this movie. How many of you have seen the new Cruella movie? Anybody? It's on early release or something on Disney. We actually paid the extra money to see it. And I was kind of dragging my feet about it. Here's why. Because I have watched the original 101 Dalmatians movie, the animated movie, probably 101 times. My girls loved this movie when they were kids, and so we watched it all the time. And in my mind, I have my mind made up about Cruella de Vil. She's awful. They did a great job designing a villain. She is a terrible person. And I know what the Disney movies are all about nowadays. It's about, ambiguity and empathy and trying to understand the villain, and I wasn't interested in that. Right? I hate Cruella de Vil. She's terrible. She wanted to make coats out of puppies. That's awful stuff. There's no part of me that wanted to have compassion for her, to hear her backstory, to realize why maybe she wasn't a villain. And that's a small example, but here's the truth about me. I worry that if I allow myself to be curious, what happens if that curiosity disrupts everything I believe about people? Whether they're the people in the world who I think of as villains, or maybe the people that work for me, their aptitudes or their motives. Or what if it's about the people in my life, my kids, my wife, the people I live with, my best friends? What if I allow myself to be curious and it disrupts everything I believe about people or the world around me? What if it even challenges parts of my faith? It's terrifying, isn't it? And so for me, even though I want to be a curious person, I know that my curiosity has some limits. As a preacher, for goodness sakes, you expect me to be sure and confident, not curious. And yet here's the rub. I've come to realize that the greatest leaders are curious for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that they know that curiosity will benefit them personally. Great leaders understand that curiosity is to their benefit. It will help their leadership. Now, I've told you I struggle to be curious as a leader sometimes, but I've recently come to discover, largely thanks to this book, Think Again by Adam Grant. Just started reading this, didn't know it would dovetail so much with our topic. But I've learned through Adam Grant that there are a group of leaders, there are a type of person who, when they discover they're wrong about something or they don't know something, they get giddy. Can you believe that? That there are actually people in this world who, when they find out they're wrong about something or they discover there's something they don't know, they get excited. It's crazy, isn't it? And no, they do not live in an enchanted forest, and they do not ride around on rainbow puking unicorns. These are real people. They actually exist. And not only do they exist, but they're the world's greatest leaders. And the reason they're okay with not knowing things or being wrong is they realize that everything they do not yet know, everything that they might presently be wrong about, may be an opportunity for some new breakthrough. That next piece of knowledge, that next piece of insight, that next challenge to their worldview may open up a new line of thinking that will be the next great breakthrough for their product, for their company, for their world, for humanity, whatever it is. Not only that, here's what they also know. They also know this. I've heard leadership described simply as this. It's moving people from here to there. If you want a simple definition of leadership, I think this is pretty good. Leaders move people from here to there, which means that we are all leaders, regardless of what your job title is. Because in life, whether it's with our kids, a sibling, a friend, we're always trying to do this, right? We're trying to help someone get from here to there. But here's what the greatest leaders understand. The greatest leaders understand that in order to move people from here to there, it's really helpful if you understand where someone's here is. It's really helpful if you really understand where someone's starting from. Before you try to move them, it's helpful if you really understand where their here is. Not just where their here is, but it's really helpful to understand why they find themselves where they are. Right? What experiences, what values, what other drivers cause them to be where they are? What things keep them from wanting to go there in the first place? Because as you know, we as people, we are all incredibly stubborn. But the problem is most of us, we just assume we know where someone's here is and why they are where they are. And we just assume we know that stuff and we try to move them without really understanding that. Parents are the worst at this. I know I am. I look at my kids and I just think, well, of course I know where you are and why you're there. It's because you're a kid. And not only are you a kid, you're my kid. I was once you. I get you. And yet the greatest leaders understand that taking a little bit of time to discover not only where someone's here is, but why they've made that place their here will be incredibly helpful to them in their work of moving someone from here to there. Sometimes just being curious is enough to get the other person to see for themselves why they might need to move from here to there. Your job is done for you. Now, we need to pause here for a second, okay? Because there's already a slight problem with what I'm telling you. This series is called Lead Like Jesus, and what I just told you really doesn't exactly apply to Jesus' leadership, does it? For one reason. Theologically, here's my belief. I have this belief theologically that Jesus already knows everything. So when Jesus goes around asking people questions, when he's curious about people, he already knows the answer. When he says, what do you want me to do for you? He already knows where their here is, why they're there. He understands it fully because he knows everything. He knows the answer that a person will give before they even give it. Not only does he know the answer they'll give, he knows the deepest drives, the desires, the motivations of the human heart. That's what I believe. I don't know if that's what you believe. That's what I believe. Scriptures teach that to be true. In my own life, I've found that to be true. That Jesus already knows it all. And today, I want you just to sit with that for a second and to ask yourself, does that alarm me or does that comfort me? How does it sit with you that Jesus already knows? He knows the answer that you'll give before you give it. He knows the real answer. He knows the drives. He knows the motives. Does that alarm you or does that comfort you? In my life, I'll tell you, it alarms me if I forget that my standing with God, my standing with Jesus is already secure. See, if I feel like I'm auditioning, and you know what that's like, don't you? In life where you feel like you're auditioning for something, maybe it's an actual audition, but you meet someone new and you're kind of auditioning to see if they'll make you a friend, if they'll let you into their inner circle. Or you're dating someone and you're auditioning for a bigger role in their life. You know what that is in the faith journey, to feel like we're auditioning before God. We're trying to be our best selves. We're trying to win God's approval. See, if I'm auditioning, then this is terrifying that Jesus already knows everything about me, because no matter what best foot forward I put out there, he knows the real me. He knows the real story. But when I can remember that I am not auditioning, that my good standing with God is already given, and here's what I know, here's what I hope you can know and experience, that when I was baptized, God gave me a designation of unshakably favorable. That's what he spoke over me, that I'm now unshakably favorable. That although there are parts of my life that are still unclean, he declares me to be clean. Though I'm unrighteous, he calls me righteous. Though I'm a sinner, he has the audacity to call me a saint. When I remember that nothing is at stake anymore, that my place in God's family is secure because of Jesus, then the fact that Jesus already knows my here, he knows where I am, and he knows why I'm there, that suddenly becomes comforting to me. Because here's the reality of all of us. We are a walking contradiction. All of us live life with a deep desire, and the deep desire is we want to be seen and known for who we really are, and we want to be loved and accepted for who we really are. That's one drive, and yet we live our lives not that way at all. We live our lives in hiding, projecting, auditioning, because we're terrified that if people really saw or knew us as we really are, that there's no way they would accept us. And yet here's what I want you to know today. Jesus is offering you unconditional acceptance, earned not by your audition, but earned by his own death and resurrection. He has invited you to have a secure place in God's family. Apart from your conduct, your behavior, how well you perform, by faith, on account of his work, he invites you to have a place of security in God's family. And when you've got that kind of security, here's what it does. Then the insight that he has on you, it's not scary, it's not threatening anymore. Instead, the insight that he has on you, on why you are where you are, and all the motives and the deep, stuff in your life, that insight becomes valuable information that you want in your own life, because his insight will become the key to your growth. If you're not auditioning, if your place is secure, suddenly it's a comfort that there is one who knows you and loves you so well. He sees the real you, and he loves you still. See, unlike the greatest leaders of the world, Jesus didn't have to be curious for his own sake. He was curious. And again, if you read the Gospels, you cannot deny this. Jesus asked so many questions. He's genuinely, he leads from a position of curiosity. He was curious for another reason, not for his own benefit, because he already knew it all. He was curious for another reason. He was curious for the benefit of those he was leading. And that's also what great leaders know. That's why they're curious. They know that curiosity will ultimately benefit the people that they lead. Socrates, you've heard of him? He kind of started this whole thing out, this idea that to really know the world better, it's called Socratic reasoning. He lived a few hundred years before Jesus, Greek philosopher. He came away with this idea that if you just ask students questions over and over again, eventually it will lead them to a place of deeper understanding. Or maybe you've heard this, I learned this from Adam Grant, that the world's greatest debaters, those people who go out and debate professionally, the world's greatest debaters are different from their very good counterparts, people who can hang but they're not the world champions, in one key area. One of the ways that they're different is that the world's greatest debaters ask twice as many questions of their audience as the very good counterparts. Not interrogations, not accusations, not prosecutorial approaches, but they tend to ask their audience honest, thoughtful questions. They're curious about the audience, and the audience then becomes curious about themselves. See, this is what Jesus does. What do you want me to do for you? He asked both the guys that we saw today, and he asked tons of other questions. What do you want me to do for you? He asks. And in asking this question, it does something within us, doesn't it? I think for us, we get confused on this topic, especially, and this is where we see it, especially when it comes to prayer. Do you ever feel this about prayer? Why do we pray? If God already knows everything that I need, he already knows the desires of my heart, he already knows the thoughts of my mind, why do I have to say that stuff out loud to him? Why do I have to pray? If God not only knows what I'm gonna say before I say it, but if he already has a plan that is better than my plan, why should I even bother praying? Did anyone ever think that? Like, what's the point of prayer? The point of prayer is that God wants to come to you, just like he did to the people we saw today in Mark chapter 10. He wants to come to you and he's asking you this question. He's inviting you into a conversation, a curious conversation with him, where you have to look within and go, okay, God, what do I want you to do for me? Now, for some of us, this is a terrifying question. What do you want me to do for you? For some of us, we have no idea what we want people to do for us. If someone in your life came and asked you that question, you would have no idea how to answer them. And this is true of a lot of us with God. I think this is an alarming question for so many people that Jesus met with, that he was just so open. What do you want me to do for you? See, the power of that question is that it makes us look inside of ourselves to figure out what it is we really want. A lot of us know that we're maybe not happy with life the way it is. We're not fulfilled. We don't feel satisfied. Life isn't what we think it should be, but we have no idea what we actually want. And asking this question, suddenly we get curious with ourselves, don't we? And you begin to search yourself, what do I want? Maybe you have to prioritize and go, of all the things I want, which is most important? Maybe you start to discover that some of the things you want are in conflict with other things, and you have to learn how to surrender some of the things you want in order to get the things that you want most. For some of us, this is a difficult question to answer. For some of us, we know what we want, but it's difficult for another reason. It's difficult because even if we know what we want, we don't want to admit that we need help. We're too afraid or embarrassed to ask for help. And the reason Jesus went around asking people this question, the reason God invites you to pray is he wants to get you out of that. He wants you to know it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to rely on someone else. It's actually really good to rely on someone else, especially if that someone else is a God who loves you and wants nothing more than to walk with you through life, to help you and to provide for you. See, here's the thing. When someone is curious with us, and if you've ever experienced someone who's just genuinely curious with you, when someone's curious with us, that helps us get curious with ourselves, and that's how we grow. And great leaders understand that job one is helping the people entrusted to them, helping them grow. And so great leaders are curious because they understand it's going to benefit their leadership. It's going to help them do their job, but they also understand that it's going to help the people entrusted to them. And so they're curious. They ask a lot of questions. Now, here's the thing. I could say a lot more, but here's what I want to do instead. I want to give you today's leadership axiom. At the beginning, we told you about these cards. They're in the seat back ahead of you. If you're online, you can just take a picture of what I'm about to show you. I want you to record these axioms. We're going to give you some lead like Jesus leadership axioms that you can apply wherever you lead in life. And if you've got a pen, you can write it down here. You can type it in your phone, or you can take a picture of this. Here's where I want to leave you today. Leading like Jesus means I spend as much time asking questions as I do making declarations. It's a great challenge for you in your leadership. Leading like Jesus means I spend as much time asking questions of my spouse, of my best friend, of my kids, of my employees, my boss. I spend as much time asking questions as I do making declarations. Now, I don't know that I can actually achieve this personally, but it's a great aspiration, isn't it? And maybe even if you can start to imagine yourself going through life, trying to make a few less declaration statements and asking a few more questions, maybe you can start to see what that might look like. Instead of going to the team who's presenting a plan or a kid who has some half-baked idea, instead of going, hey, you know what, that'll never work. I know because I'm the leader, I've got experience, or I've got more understanding than you. Instead of making that declaration, maybe instead you could ask, you know, interesting plan, what are you really hoping to achieve? And if that plan worked out perfectly, what would be the best case scenario you can imagine? What might be some unrealized or unseen risks in that plan? How could things go wrong, and where would that take you, right? There's always a way to ask questions instead of making declarations, and this is what great leaders know, that rather than making declarations, it's so much more helpful to you and the people you lead to ask more questions as Christians instead of just preaching to people like I'm up here doing. What if we spent more time just asking people sincere questions, being curious about them? See, here's the reality. If Jesus, who knew everything, took the time to be curious, then people like us, who know a little bit less than Jesus, perhaps maybe we should be curious too. Let me pray. God in heaven, thank you so much for being curious about us. You know us already. You could write books on me that would just describe the inner workings of my being, things that I don't understand about myself. You understand so well. You know me fully, inside and out. And yet I'm so grateful that you don't come to me just preaching to me. I'm grateful that you've invited me into a relationship with you. I'm so grateful you take a posture of curiosity with me, where you enter into a journey of discovery, me and you together. God, I know that disposition has been so helpful to me. It's opened up my life. It's helped me learn more about myself. I'm so grateful you come to me, you come to us in that way. Lord, I confess that that's not how I am as your follower. That's not how I am as a leader. And so, Lord, I pray you'd make me like Jesus. Just start to rewire my brain to be more curious, to ask more questions, to want to serve the people around me with my curiosity, helping them become more curious and growing in the knowledge of themselves in the same way that you're helping me do that. Lord, I pray that for all of us. I pray that for this church. I pray that for your church on earth, that we'd lead more like Jesus in this way. Inspire our curiosity, I pray, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you guys just being a part of our Pathfinder online community. It's awesome to have you here. I want to encourage you, if you're new, to go and find some helpful links in the description of this video, or you can find it at our website, pathfinderstl.org. And while you're there, I want to encourage you to look for the Pathfinder Message podcast. While you're on the go, it's a great way to find old messages, new messages, and just be able to listen to those messages. So I want to encourage you to do that. Also, make sure you like and share this video. Those are two great ways to allow more people to be able to see this. And then also drop a comment so that we know how this impacted you on your journey. Thank you so much. I hope that you know that you belong here. I hope you have an awesome week.